Got Dr. Yvonne Thompson CBE. She's the author of 7 Traits of Highly Successful Women on Boards. Yvonne, so lovely to have listened to you earlier today in the Global Women Summit. And as I said when I was speaking, that I know that you were a board member of Choice FM, and oh my God, Choice was just the best of its time, was it not?
It certainly was. It's really quite nostalgic, and it was a huge, tug to have to sell it. But, you know, sometimes it's a bit like your children. If you want them to grow, you have to let them go. So we sold.
Gosh, amazing. Well done. It was such a contribution, really, because when you think about the enjoyment and not just the enjoyment, but how it shaped people, you know, of a whole generation.
Yeah, I feel that it certainly had changed the music culture or youth culture, actually, not just music, the culture of youth in the UK. When we started Choice FM, you couldn't hear black music on mainstream radio stations. So you always had to listen to a specialist radio program. So it'll be 10 o'clock at night on Capital Radio, or it'll be, you know, some other weird time on
Tony Blackburn.
So weird time of night at the weekend, tucked away, where nobody, luckily for us, except the youth were listening. So when it came full-time, mainstream, 24/7, it literally just changed the youth culture.
It did, and we could finally listen to. I want to use the word black music, because that, you know, just the most iconic music, without having to turn to underground stations, right? Which came and went. They were not always there.
They say that really good trends start in a niche. And sometimes when it gets to the mainstream, then it becomes like everything else. So unfortunately, even though we had the best time, you know, putting the station together, running the station, finding the DJs, doing events with the audience, getting, you know, that great feedback, for about 15 years we had the station before we actually sold it. And it was, you know, some of the best years of my life. So.
And I want to talk to you about specifically being a woman on the board of a mainstream organization, because my background is 25 years in corporate business.
Right.
And I really understand the challenges of what that means, even today, even though we're now in the 21st century. Even so, the challenges are there. And you've written this book here, 7 Traits. Let's talk about those 7 traits. Can you go through them?
Yeah, sure. So the traits, and how I came about the traits, was I interviewed over 60 women, decided on publishing 22 of their stories. In fact, I decided on publishing 21 stories, and then just as I was about to submit the manuscript, an extraordinary woman came into my purview. I had to wait a month before I could interview her, and then it took me another 2 weeks to write up the interview. So my manuscript, my publishing date, was put back about 6 weeks because I had to have this woman. And that particular woman, I wanted her so much because for the first 40 years of her life, she was a man. So she's transgender, and the story was just breathtaking. So, you know, when people do eventually read the book, they'll find out it's Antonia Belcher. But I mean, they're all fantastic stories. They're all great tips, get great advice, great inspiration. They're all inspirational women who have come in, mostly come in at the bottom and work their way. So it's the whole journey, which is really good. But going back to what the traits are, when we did the interview, we asked 24 people, 30 questions, and the things that kept rising to the top was about leadership. What kind of leader are you? Who do you think is the most iconic leader in recent times? What kind of leader do you want to be? All the kind of leadership questions you need to ask. Then we talked about education. And education, I mean, again, that was mentioned today by especially Mandy. I thought what she talked about, not feeling that she was educated enough to do what she wanted to do, but she made her money anyway and then went back to education. That resonated with me a lot because there's a lot of that comes through the book. Then we talk about advice, and advice is everything from mentoring, coaching, and corporate sponsorship. So again, we talked about that today. Diversity on boards, well, we all know about diversity on boards. There's not enough of it as far as women is concerned. There's even less as far as race diversity is concerned. Then there's emotional intelligence. You need emotional intelligence to work with men, especially when you're the only woman on that board. Resilience, you need resilience even more. We all know why, because it's hard being on a board when you're the only woman. It's hard to get your voice heard. It's hard to be taken seriously sometimes. So you need to build up your resilience. And then the S is sidebar. And sidebar is what you do to build up what I call your bounce back ability. So coming to conferences like this, where there's lots of inspirational women, where you can be reinvigorated, and then people at the weekend, what they do at the weekend to chop or close down that corporate, their corporate life, to totally get away from their corporate life. One lady, Paula Bennells, she's chief executive of the post office. So her weekday is very male orientated. I would say white van man, but in her case it's red van man. Lots of men, right up to the top of the level of the board, the corporate ladder, corporate structure, and then at the board it drops off totally. But at the weekend, Paula is a vicar. So she goes home at the weekend, she marries people, she christens babies, she doesn't do any funerals, she says. She has Sunday Mass, she does all the things that a vicar does. And for the whole weekend, she's cut right off of that corporate message. And then she goes back on a Monday morning and starts all over again. So the sidebar is about building up your bounce back ability. And those letters form the acronym LEADERS. So that's what the traits are.
So you're talking about, the bounce back ability, sidebar you call it. I would say it's more about connecting to something which is really precious to you, that recharges you, that puts you in touch with the core of who you are as a human being and as a spiritual being. Wouldn't you say that?
It's all of that and more, because it's about ensuring you have the time with the family. Because that's, for me, that's one of the most important things, family time. We can, as women, again, we talked about, as women, we have to do twice as much. We have to work twice as hard, twice as long, just to stand still. And then when you get to the top, it's like 3 times. You have to keep going. Otherwise, you just fall off that. You fall off the ladder, you fall off the bicycle. It's like pedaling. I think someone described it as being what did she call it? I think she said a duck, but I would call it a swan. That's much more graceful. On the top, you look graceful, you haven't got a care on the world, but underneath, you're pedaling furiously just to keep up. So it's about, for me, as well as the whole spiritual thing and the whole mind thing, it is about family time as well.
So being around whatever it is, finding whatever it is, the source of your nurturance, whether it's family or something else, is what I hear you say. Yeah. You know, I do wonder why it is that women don't put themselves forward more for being in leadership roles. What's your take on that? I have my points of view on that, but I want to hear yours.
I'm sure. Well, coming from a corporate background, yes. I'm sure you've got lots of views on it. So again, for me, the things that we find again through the research that we did, what we found was this whole imposter syndrome. You know, it's the same old thing. We just don't believe that we're capable. We don't think we're good enough. We don't think we belong there. It's all of those things. Whereas, you know, we use the example of applying for jobs, and a man will apply for a job if he thinks he's 40% ready for the job, and he might get the job and he'll learn on the job. But women, as women, we tend to think we've got to be 140% before we even think about applying. But we need to be more bold. I did a little experiment about being bold. We need to be more bold. We need to be brave. We need to be gender brave. And in some cases, what's happening more and more, we need to be colour brave. Because, as I talked about, there's just not enough race on boards. There's not enough people of colour on boards. And I think the UK needs to wake up, corporate UK needs to wake up and think about it, because the UK is becoming, well, it is already the most so London is the most cosmopolitan city in the world. And if, you know, UK corporates don't wake up very soon, they're going to lose out big time.
You know, I want to come back to the gender brave issue, because my experience in the corporate field has been that women, I know we're now in 21st century, but, you know, we have the role models of the past, such as Margaret Thatcher and Hillary Clinton. And there are others, but what women often tend to do is they become more male, they bring out more of their male qualities when they are amongst male-dominated, let me put that. When women are in a male-dominated environment, they feel as though they need to become more male themselves, whereas in fact, what it takes, I feel, what it has taken is for women to become more themselves, more at ease in their own skin, to become more of who they are, and bring both the qualities with them, but especially the feminine, and have the confidence to be able to express that. And the second thing that I've noticed, and I want to hear your view on this, is rather than, I think we don't understand men enough, and men don't understand women enough. So we are biologically different, we're psychologically different, and, you know, we are not the same, and that's just how it is, and we have to learn to accept that and love that, because then we can start to talk really to, it's like speaking German to someone who's Japanese, and it just doesn't flow. And that's what I feel is really a big barrier. It's about learning the difference between men and women, and being able to understand and then speak to that, and then also teaching men how to speak to us.
Yeah. Well, you know, at the end of the day, underneath the skin and underneath the physiological obvious differences, we're all the same. We are the same. We need air. We have to eat. We have to breathe. And like some people would say, you know, using the expletives, we all have to go to the toilets. You know, so there are very basic similarities, but when it comes to the way in which we do things, there is a big difference. It is, and for me, there's a whole thing now about leading with emotional intelligence. And the whole emotional intelligence piece is becoming more and more important. You know, that whole unconscious bias. I mean, how many corporates are putting people through unconscious bias training, which is a part of the whole emotional intelligence, because it's about knowing and respecting and learning about other people. You know, that whether it's race, whether it's gender, whatever it is, you know, the whole diversity strands. So for me, women are more emotionally intelligent than men, I feel, and in most cases. And that is the way that leadership and a lot of corporates are now, that's the way they are now, or the way they're moving towards leading with emotional intelligence. And I think the sooner that more men go through emotional intelligence training and apply it to their leadership roles, the better we're all going to be. But I think it's really interesting what's happening right now with, as I said on the stage, 3 women leading 3 of the largest world economies. You know, I just pray to God that we don't have a Lehman Sisters.
Exactly, yeah, because it is about being comfortable as a woman and allowing yourself to accept and express the femininity as much as, you know, it's bringing into balance the masculine feminine principle. And I think women can do that. Perhaps they're more ready to be able to do that. I don't know. There are men who are.
Yeah, I'm sure there are, but not enough. No. Not enough. And I think the world will be a better place when more of us understand about emotional intelligence.